Many opponents of the theory of evolution cite one very interesting argument as proof of their rightness. They wonder, why don't modern apes evolve into humans now? It's very difficult to explain to these people that this formulation is greatly simplified. In fact, apes and humans shared a common ancestor many millions of years ago. Our ancestors and the ancestors of modern apes evolved under different conditions. As a result, each species acquired its own unique traits and abilities. In one of our previous videos, we already talked about all the known ancestors and relatives of man. Today, we'll try to briefly explain the reasons for the appearance of people exactly as they are now. By subscribing to the Age of Dinosaurs channel, you could be the first to know about the release of the next episode. And your likes and comments will help in the work of the channel's creators and its promotion according to the platform's algorithms. This will allow science lovers to get acquainted with the history of the evolution of different animal species. The main features of modern man, in comparison with his relatives, monkeys are a developed brain, walking on two legs, developed speech, and an almost complete absence of hair on the body. Even though other modern hominids are physically much stronger, our features have helped us become the dominant species on the entire planet. The reason for the transition to upright walking was most likely climate change in the places where our ancestors lived. The sharp decline in forests and the emergence of vast grassy plains forced them to begin to adapt. If you stand on two legs, you could see the approaching danger earlier. Also, if necessary, you could pick up some kind of tool or weapon. And with the loss of body fur, the females also had to carry their cubs in their arms. Before this, they successfully rode on their parents' backs, clinging to the fur. Our closest relatives are chimpanzees. Their genome differs from the human genome by only 6.4%. It's believed that approximately 5 to 6 million years ago, our ancestors dispersed to different regions of Africa. Those who eventually became monkeys found themselves in forested areas. They were adapted to an arboreal lifestyle. They ate mainly plant foods. From an evolutionary point of view, apes are ideally suited for such a life. But the ancestors of the first people had to solve completely different problems. On land, they were easy prey for more adaptable predators. Therefore, it was necessary to develop mechanisms to counter new dangers. Also, in the steppes, there was much less of the usual fruits. It became necessary to learn how to dig up roots, and most importantly, the first primitive people began to hunt other animals. Probably at first, they were small rodents and birds. With the invention of new types of weapons and methods of hunting, man has become the most formidable predator on the planet. The first man-made tools were created by creatures such as Homo habilis. The age of the oldest units found are about 2,300,000 years old. They learned to make simple stone axes. These tools were used for sharpening sticks and cutting meat from prey. With a maximum height of 120 centimeters and a body weight of up to 50 kilograms, surviving in the African savanna was quite difficult. The habilis had to become much smarter. Judging by the structure of the skulls found, they began to undergo serious changes in the brain. The occipital lobe decreased, while the parietal, frontal and temporal lobes increased. Their brain volume was approximately 650 cubic centimeters. In our brain, the frontal lobe's responsible for conscious movement, as well as speech and writing. The parietal lobe of the brain is responsible for orientation in space. Temporal is involved in the process of creating long-term memory, as well as in processing information coming from the organs of hearing and vision. These changes may indicate that a skilled person began to move better, remember the surrounding environment, and perhaps began to consciously communicate with relatives. The next link on the path from ape to man can be considered a working person or Homo ergaster. The discovery of this species of ancient people greatly complicated the process of studying human development. Before this, it was believed that evolution proceeded in stages, from simpler to more developed. But a discovery made in 1971 in Kenya showed that several species of people lived in the same area at the same time. The age of the find is estimated at approximately 1.5 to 1.8 million years. It was the skeleton of a woman. It's noteworthy that the remains of an Australopithecus were found in the same layers as it. Ergasters could grow up to 180 centimeters in length. At the same time, their brain volume was even greater than that of the habilis. It was approximately 900 cubic centimeters. The frontal lobe increased further. This indicates the possible beginnings of normal speech. The reason for this increase could be an increase in meat consumption. But with the primitive tools they had at the time, it's unlikely that the person working was a successful hunter. With a high probability, these possible ancestors of ours ate carrion, driving away predatory animals from their prey. Homo erectus began the spread of humanity around the world. According to the latest data, it's a descendant of a working person, and the time of its appearance is considered to be approximately 2 million years ago. Between 1.5 and 1 million years ago, this human species moved to the Middle East and then to Europe and Asia. On the island of Java, the descendants of erectus lived until our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, appeared in this region. Also, the remains of representatives of this species were found in Germany, China, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Spain. But it's worth noting that scientists are now dividing the European and Asian branches of development into separate varieties of humans. Heidelberg, a man that lived in Europe, and Sinanthropus, a man that lived in Asia. Erectuses also became the ancestors of the mysterious hobbits from the island of Flores. Unlike all previous species, these people walked completely upright. Habilis and ergasters had a hunched gait. The height of Homo erectus was between 150 to 180 centimeters. The volume of the brain was up to 1,200 cubic centimeters. But outwardly, they did not yet closely resemble a modern person. The chin was sloping. The brow ridges protruded strongly. They lived in small communities of about 35 to 40 individuals. Families were polygamous or harem. Erectus knew how to build houses and used natural fire. They also take care of old and infirm relatives. There are suggestions that in this primitive society there were the beginnings of medicine and culture, and possibly religion. Finally, 250,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, a modern type of man, appeared in Africa. About 100,000 years ago, it began its expansion throughout the world. For some time, in different parts of the planet, they lived simultaneously with other species of people, but gradually there was no one left on Earth except our immediate ancestors. In Europe, about 40,000 years ago, sapiens displaced Neanderthals from habitable places. Scientists are still only guessing about the reasons for the extinction of habilis and erectus, but the activity of Homo sapiens is one of the main versions. About 50,000 years ago, people reached Australia on the simplest rafts, and about 15,000 years ago, they moved to America along the frozen Bering Strait. These people were practically no different from us in appearance. They knew how to make fairly high-quality tools and weapons from stone, wood, and bone, sewed clothes for themselves, and built homes. They were no different from us either in behavior or mental abilities. And they certainly didn't resemble their ape-like ancestors, who decided to exchange life in the forest for the African savannas. The very concept of man for us is rather philosophical in nature. From a biological point of view, humans are a species of primate. And in fact, we don't have many differences from the same chimpanzees. But it's these differences that have made our species the most successful in competing for the top of the food pyramid. Let's try to briefly characterize the features that distinguish humans from monkeys. Bipedalism, or walking on two legs. Scientists suggest that upright walking distinguished our ancestors, who lived about 6 to 7 million years ago in the vastness of the African continent. Bipedalism was characteristic of all known species of Australopithecus and their predecessors. Ardipithecus. The remains of the so-called Sahelanthropus, found in the vicinity of Lake Chad, don't contain the bones of the lower extremities. But judging by the structure of the skull characteristic of other species of people, it could be assumed that this creature already walked on two legs. The occipital bones, to which the neck muscles are attached, of this primitive man were flattened. This suggests that his body more often took a vertical position, relying only on his legs. Opponents of this theory say that the bones of the back of the head could have been damaged after the death of Sahelanthropus. But even modern apes walk on two legs when necessary. This may indicate that the rudiments of this method of movement began to form even before the division of our common ancestors into separate branches of development. Articulate speech. It's the ability to communicate using meaningful sounds that are one of the many characteristic features of people. Of course, many animals use this method of communication, but our speech is much more varied and effective. It's difficult to understand which of our ancestors was the first to master this important skill. Scientists do have their bones at their disposal. but it's almost impossible to draw any conclusions from them. A part of the cerebral cortex called Broca's area is responsible for speech, but chimpanzees also have it. Although their Broca center is only responsible for facial expressions, we can definitely say that Neanderthals actively use speech. In addition to the necessary brain structure, they also had the corresponding genes. Genetic analysis of the remains of earlier human species is difficult due to their great distance in time. RAM. When solving various practical and theoretical problems, we are able to simultaneously operate with several objects. Moreover, information about each of them stored in a separate area of our brain. It's believed that the average person's RAM is capable of holding up to 7 objects. For example, when hammering a nail, we're dealing with 2 to 3 objects at a time: a hammer, a nail, and the material into which it's driven. The chimpanzees closest to us can crack nuts using a stone. They can also use any object, such as an anvil, to do this. But their brains are not capable of solving a more complex problem or, moreover, proving a theorem using 5 to 6 objects. Special hormones. In all primates, hormones such as endorphins are responsible for some memory-related functions. They not only regulate some emotions, but also contribute to the memorization of information. The body produces this hormone from a special protein, prodynorphin, but in humans and chimpanzees, the genes responsible for the production of this protein are different. Prodynorphin itself is completely identical in people and their relatives. But thanks to some long-standing mutation, humans produce about 20% more of it. Nutritional features. Primitive people like ergasters or erectus certainly already used fire. But the big question is whether they could have extracted it themselves. But sapiens and Neanderthals definitely knew how to make fires without the help of lightning or volcanoes. And this factor, in any case, became one of the most important in human evolution. Experiments conducted on animals showed that those who eat thermally processed meat gain weight faster. And if this meat is also passed through a meat grinder, then the process goes even faster. Our ancestors constantly increased in size throughout their evolution. Along with this, the volume of the brain also increased. It's not yet known exactly how earlier species of people ate, but an analysis of the remains of Neanderthals showed that their diet consisted exclusively of meat, and Homo sapiens turned out to be generalists. They ate both plant, foods, and fish. This could have also impacted their victory in the struggle for survival. Features of adolescence. By and large, only humans have the concept of adolescence. At a certain period of time, the cub and its physical characteristics ceases to be much inferior to adults. But for several more years, they remained under the tutelage of more experienced relatives and acquired the skills necessary for survival. Other primates began to reproduce as soon as they reached sexual maturity. According to some data, the situation was approximately the same among the Neanderthals. Moreover, there's a version that they reach puberty at about 7 to 8 years. Lack of personal life experience could lead to higher mortality among the adult population of the communities, whereas sapiens could more seriously prepare their offspring for independent life. We thank everyone who watched this episode to the end. If you're interested in the history of the discovery of various prehistoric creatures, we recommend watching other videos on our channel. You can also find a lot of interesting information about modern animals, the history of our planet, and the problems of human society.